For today I have prepared standard weathering and model finishing procedures. So you will see wash, chip and scratches, rust, polishing, dusting, stains, extra effects, details and stowage and final touches. Welcome back to the channel, and before we get started make sure to like and subscribe. As you can see, the model is ready to start further work. In general it hasn't changed much since the previous painting episode. We start with the wash. In the last video I've checked that this product works very well with the color and texture of the paint I used on the model, so there is no point in looking for other solutions. If you haven't watched the previous episodes, I recommend these products because of their quality and such a small feature as a dropper, which definitely facilitates the work and saves the amount of fluid used. It's similar with the thinner and most importantly they smell nice. Applying wash is not some black magic, but the effect of this process can already be treated like this because after it the model gains depth and it's definitely more 3D. In the case of Merkava the biggest challenge is to wash the armor with anti-slip texture. The usual places typical of all other models don't cause problems, but the rough surface makes us pay more attention. My advice is simple. The most important thing is to apply wash in moderation and quite close to the target site. The point is that it's hard to wash it off thoroughly from all rough surfaces. Of course it can be done, but there will always be something left. All in all, it's not bad because the particles that we glued earlier will be underlined, but from my experience it's better not to overdo the amount of product on these surfaces. You can clearly see how easily wash spreads on a surface that wasn't even covered with satin varnish. Note how I wash off any excess paint with a clean thinner. Of course, making all the steps of weathering, we need to have in mind the final appearance of the model we want to achieve and try to copy the real tanks in some aspects of their appearance. They are generally dirty, so make them dirty. The best way is to practice it by yourself. In addition, a very good solution was to paint the small elements with a lighter shade because they increase the contrast between the individual parts of the model. This can be seen very clearly in the battering ram. Of course, my favorite tool, the accelerator, will undoubtedly be useful to speed up all the work. On the side panels the effect will be concentrated mainly around all the protruding bolts because there are quite a few of them. Of course, working with a clean thinner is necessary here, but on flat surfaces you can also use a regular paper towel. The use of cotton buds is quite popular. I use them but only on completely flat surfaces. The worst thing for me about them is that they leave little pollen. I saw dust-free Tamiya sticks and maybe they do the job, I don't know. If anyone has some experience, let me know in the comments. Before I start the wash on the turret, first I remove the masks from the periscopes and the armored windows. Of course on the hull I did that before and now it's the moment of truth. Fortunately there is no disaster, but the glass needs a bit of cleaning from the glue left by the masking tape. and repeat the whole procedure on the turret. It's worth paying attention to the precise application of wash on the barrel elements and white identification stripes. It's simply that on white paint the color change caused by wash is much more noticeable. Correct cleaning of the excess will definitely improve the situation, but you need to be vigilant. Now you can clearly see the difference between a surface covered with wash and completely clean one. We will unify everything in a moment. Now you can observe how the product behaves on the rough surface during application and washing off the excess. Okay, first step taken, so now let's make some chips and scratches. I used dark brown paint as standard to prepare the scratches. Earlier I looked at the photos of Merkava to check how many of them should be on the model. And the truth is that not much. On the one hand it all depends on the specific vehicle, and on the other hand the vast majority of them didn't have the typical strong scratches to which we are used to. On the turret I decided to copy the ideas from the photos I had in my collection. On the side panels I will mainly focus on the oblong scratches that can arise when in contact with bushes and low trees. I tried to make them really delicate. Thanks to the fact that I made the handles with soldering wire before, the damage is very easy to achieve. The pictures of the bridge adapters show that they are often quite battered, so here I can make some more chips. When we already have chips, you need to add a little ketchup to them. They will taste better. 2 shades of oil paint will be enough to tint the scratches with a rusty coating. Interestingly, while the amount of scratches on tanks of this type is small, the amount of rust that appears on them is much greater. That is why I decided to do it. Thinner and oil paints are sufficient to recreate this effect. You need to remember that in a moment there will be also a lot of dust here, so the colors will be a bit muffled. I applied small amounts of diluted paint to various parts of the tank and to the tools. The excess was obviously washed off with a thinner, even on the barrel, especially in the area of the thermal sleeve bands, which I also noticed in the photos of real vehicles. The upper surfaces of the turret have also been quite heavily enriched with a rusty bloom. Once the rust is dry, I started polishing some parts with a soft pencil. What is interesting, here you can afford more while this job because they won't be so visible after all. It's all about reflecting of the light. The silicone tip will also do the job, it all depends on what we have at hand because the effect will be the same. The same mix as I used on the wheels and tracks in the previous episode was applied to entire chassis and bottom of the turret. Please check the link above. It may seem that there is too much of it, but when it dries, its intensity decreases. Of course, the front and rear sides of the fuselage were also covered with it. In addition, also around the ring of the turret. This stage cannot do with an accelerator because, as usual, it definitely accelerates the drying of the paint. And we start playing with pigments. For some it's a standard, for others it's something that doesn't necessarily have to be applied to the model. A matter of taste. All applied pigments were fixed with white spirit. I have limited myself to visible places so as not to waste time and material on surfaces that are unlikely to see the daylight. Therefore the pigment only appeared on the front and rear fenders and is absent at all on the inside of the side skirts. At this point it's time to put the wheels on and clip the tracks. All wheels, regardless of the material they are made of, were glued with standard plastic glue. Contrary to appearances, it's strong enough to attach even resin, not like CA glue of course, but it does the trick. Besides, it has a longer drying time, so I can easily put the wheels in an even line. After the road wheels, I put the tracks in their place and added idlers and drive wheels. Now all that is left is to fasten the links and the vehicle has the entire chassis complete. Although the tracks are movable, I stuck them with little glue on the wheels. This way I limited the possibility of any movement, and so it doesn't matter when the model is standing on the base, because the models are for that, to stand on the base and enjoy the eye. There are other toys to play war. We are still in the dusting stage of the vehicle, and now I will look at the top surfaces. I do everything in exactly the same way using white spirit and the accelerator. Of course you have to control the amount of pigment applied, as it's easy to overdo it. While we can wipe it somehow from flat surfaces, either with tools or with finger, it's impossible on a rough anti-slip texture. Therefore, it's better to add small amount a few times than too much at once. It's also worth noting that thanks to the pigments we can make an interesting contrast. Here is a good example around the cannon support. Perfectly stands out against the background of the dusty armor. On the sides of the vehicle I put the pigment on the lower sections in the larger amount and distribute it vertically up and down. Of course it's worth doing a bit of variation and in some places add more or less of it. I rotate the model and continue to apply dust on all surfaces. Do you remember how noticeable the color of weathering paint was when I applied it to the bottom of the turret? Now pigments have taken the lead, and for good reason. This place is not wiped at all by the crew during the service, so you can easily dust all its elements. I treated the sides of the turret like the sides of the hull, making vertical streaks. At the top the dust appeared mainly on the tarp as on an element that has been left untouched for quite a long time, and rather nobody walks on it. I also added a bit of pigment near the hatches. Stains appear best on dusty surfaces. Then the thinner is best soaking up and spreading the pigment from the paint. As you can see near the hatches, I didn't spare this effect, which is often confirmed by photos of real vehicles and my own observations. On the sides of the fuselage, first of all I applied small spots using the speckling technique, but in addition to that I also added bigger stains. We are slowly approaching to the end, so it's time for some extra effects. The first thing I have to do are fumes. Black pigments will be perfect for this. It's worth remembering that Merkava tanks have double exhaust, so the truck should be in two places, absolutely not at all outlets. I blow off the pigment excess with the accelerator. The end of the barrel is very often without paint, so you can easily treat it with a pencil. The black tip and silver finish harmonize perfectly with each other. All the three machine guns were first coated with 3 coats of dark rust weathering paint. Why? The weapons should be preserved and oiled. Yes, but the photos say something completely different. In addition to the rust, I also added dust and silver abrasions, which made the weapon look really used intensively in the field. That was exactly what it was about. As for me, the most important details in Merkava tanks are the antennas. They are very characteristic and they are very important on the model. You have to remember that the antennas shouldn't be bent due to the material from which they are made. Therefore, metal bars are best for this purpose. I use the modeling thread to attach them. It's quite flexible, which makes it easy to stretch. The only thing you need is to be careful about when gluing and not to overdo it with the amount of glue, because then the thread is bent in the wrong direction. Of course, when the camera is on, then some demons cause that not everything goes as it should. The antennas should be attached with special hooks, but here I didn't make them and tied the thread directly on the rods. Several times I saw that the crews wrapped the antenna springs in plastic bags. I don't know why they do it, whether it protects against moisture or there is any other reason, but it's a nice idea and it's easy to implement. All you need is a piece of tin foil and a bit of glue, and we have an interesting place that will surely attract the attention of viewers. Of course, there is a chain on my model. Yellow stands out nicely on the color of the vehicle, and it's not my invention because the photos show such a color element used mainly during loading vehicles for road transport. I glued the chain with the pigment cement, which perfectly binds such elements with the surface and, most importantly, doesn't leave any traces after drying. Now a bit of mega detailing with the use of ammunition belt connectors from live resin and empty shells from master models. I realized that it's quite expensive, but they add a lot to the appearance of the model. How to make them look natural and stick to the surface. First I paint the connectors as they are still on the casting block. Then I cut them off gently from the support. I take the shells straight from the bike and put everything on the model at the beginning to see how they will look like. Here I used 25 shells and about the same number of connectors. Each single element can be glued separately with the use of pigment cement because, as I said before, it doesn't leave stains. There can be used any other glue, but I prefer this one. Now you need to glue one by one, or you can also soak several elements at once if they are close together. It's important that the cut-off points of the connectors are not visible, then we will avoid additional painting. If you can see them, a little paint is enough. After the glue dries, we make a wash on the shells because they are unpainted and shine quite well. I know that a few episodes ago I said that everything has to be painted, but in the case of shells, the wash alone is enough. This is an exception to the rule. Connectors may or may not be polished with a pencil. A bit of civilian life will also be useful, and it will be a colorful backpack. This is a product from Eureka XXL. It fits perfectly on the model and it looks great. IDF food ration boxes are very popular as an accessory for the models. Initially I also planned to put one on the model, but I ended up making a part of it under a box with oranges. If you've been watching my channel for some time, you probably remember that mustard seeds and its size are perfect for making potatoes, tomatoes, apples, oranges and other similar fruits and vegetables. A plastic box from Mach 1 models is half full of grains. I glued them with pigment cement and painted with acrylic paints. In addition, I put some garden hose to it and fastened it on a piece of the box. The whole thing sticks to the tank thanks to the expander, which I painted in spots to add more colors to the final look. Two water bottles add a little extra life to the model. Using one of the weathering paints that were used to dust the vehicle, I did the final work on the model to make it even more dirty. I copied this idea from Merkava photo that I found during the preparation for construction. The leak is really big and I did the same here. I didn't spare it and I think the effect is pretty cool. On the other side I did the same, but I spread the spots on the sides of the vehicle in different way. And now many thanks to my patrons for the support. If you want to join this exclusive group, just check my website. I think that you won't be disappointed with the content, as there are full HD photos I don't publish anywhere else. In addition, you will be able to watch my movies much earlier and be informed about the projects I intend to implement. You can find the link in the description below and at the end of this video. The chain is now completely dry, so I added some dust to it that would undoubtedly accumulate there while riding. And now I can say that the model is ready. What do you think about it? Write in the comments, because I'm very curious about your opinion. Do you like it or not? It's a piece of good work or a piece of shit? Just let me know. Next week I will make a model base and that will be the end of this project. That's all for today. Oh, I forgot to add the traditional ones. Like, subscribe, share and tell your friends about my channel. Cheers!